running.
Okay, ready, every.
Can we begin?
Yes.
Can we go on time? Okay. So, Craig, can you tell me where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in South Africa, in Johannesburg.
Sorry,
Oh.
I'm not. Nils, ich kann ihn nicht hören.
Oh.
Das ist zu laut.
Okay.
Weird.
Ich weiß nicht warum.
Sprich nochmal.
Yes,
Okay.
do you hear me? Yeah? Okay.
Ah, ist besser. Vielleicht hatte ich hier die Hand am Mikro.
Huh.
Okay.
Wahrscheinlich,
Ja.
ne?
Okay,
Okay.
super.
I was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, but after 6 months I moved to Seattle in Washington State, USA, where I grew up until going to college in New York.
Okay. Now, how did your family get to South Africa, to Johannesburg?
My parents came, no.
Sure.
My grandparents grew up in Latvia, Lithuania, and Belarus, and they all left there to go to South Africa between 1870 and 1934. Mostly they left in the 1930s. And they were just trying to get out, mostly before things got really bad for economic reasons. And that was one of the places where you could go, and so they just went to see where they could get to, and that's where the ship was going, and so they left.
All right. And why did they leave South Africa?
My parents grew up in apartheid South Africa. So, as you can imagine, that was just a really intense place to live. And they definitely didn't agree with the apartheid policies. I think they weren't extreme radical activists, but they were definitely working against the system. I remember one day my grandmother caught my father, she saw that he had a book of Marx in his bedroom, and she said, "We have to get rid of this right away," and they buried it somewhere or something because they could get into a lot of trouble for that sort of thing. So they wanted to get out because the political situation, also for Jews there, it wasn't a great place. Obviously they weren't the worst out of everybody there, but you definitely could get beat up at school, or they would have parties and they'd have to watch out for who showed up because there were just all kinds of tensions.
Okay, great. Now, tell me a little bit about being Jewish in Seattle. Was your family religious?
Growing up in Seattle as a Jew was interesting, I think, because Seattle's a very liberal place. To me, actually, the culture feels like a lot of things I encounter in Berlin and in Germany. People recycle, they like to bike and spend time outdoors, and they're into green energy and all these kinds of things. So I don't know. For me, I grew up like most South Africans. I think because of going to such a faraway place, they really stuck with their culture to a certain extent. But they also were living, in the shadow of the Holocaust and, disconnected from a lot of other, communities and things. So we were traditional. We kept kosher at home. We didn't have any kind of unkosher meat or anything. But we weren't particularly religious per se. We would go to synagogue sometimes for the holidays and things. But culturally, we were quite Jewish. Grew up with some music from the Klezmer revival, and learning about Israel and all these different sort of things that are typical of an American Jewish experience, I think. Eating bagels, watching Fiddler on the Roof, sort of these cultural things were really important. But in Seattle, I sort of had the feeling that there was nothing wrong with being Jewish. I wasn't, attacked for it. Maybe I was teased a little bit or something about some of the dietary things, but not really. I didn't have much negative experience. But I did have the feeling that in order to really be an American, in order to really be like my friends, I had to kind of not hold on too tight to those things. So it was more like this being encouraged to choose not to identify with it too much, because that allowed me to be an American. I think especially for me, like I always had this funny feeling that I was actually a first-generation immigrant, more or less. I was born in South Africa. My parents had already left, but I was the first one in America, like growing up there. And culturally they came from a slightly different place, but at the same time they spoke English as their first language. I obviously spoke English as my first language. I have white skin. I could sort of choose whether I wanted to be perceived as anything but just another American kid. So it sort of, there was a lot of gentle pressure or temptation to not really identify as a Jew too strongly, but that was my own choice. And I think because of that, I never fully left the feeling of Judaism. And I don't know, I was always kind of a bit spiritually minded and into traditional cultures and things. So I think also for me, actually identifying as a Jew as I got a little bit older towards the end of high school, became a way of me to not feel that I'm just another, white person, another colonialist, that I'm in America because that's, a long story put me there, and not because my parents came to steal the land from the Native Americans or something.
Okay, that's very interesting. Now, I want you just to, if you can say in a few words, how you might feel different from the European Jews that you've met, some of the main differences.
Mm-hmm. I think the Jewish experience in America and Europe is actually quite different. I'm pretty lucky, I think, because I grew up in Seattle, a very liberal place where there was enough of a Jewish community that we had, a good number of options. And then moved to New York, where there's obviously like as many options for what Jewish could mean as you would want. So I was always able to find find a community that felt interesting, and also to kind of exist between different communities. In America, there's a huge variety of liberal Judaism, of people that identify with the practices, but maybe also want to be more accepting of different sexualities and different things, or people who are quite traditional, but also really value environmental ethics, or also, just want to listen to rock and roll or something, there's, and then even among the religious, there's really a ton of variety of how people express that, how much they interact with the general world, how strictly do they take their practices and things. So I was able to learn from a lot of different people. And I think in Europe, there's generally either you're religious or you're not, and maybe you can be sort of reform and sort of mildly religious, but mostly it's either like you're really doing it, or it's just a word that people call you, kind of. And so I think it's a lot harder to identify with Judaism in Europe, and to find a way of practicing that it feels authentic for yourself.
Very good. Now, I wanted to ask you, you've played a lot of different musical styles. Does it feel different for you if you play Jewish music?
Yeah, it's interesting being a violinist, a fiddler. You sort of have a ticket to anywhere you want to go. Almost every country has a tradition that you can be a part of, and so it's always for me been an amazing way to travel and to participate and sort of be in conversation with cultures. Growing up, I listened to a bit of American, traditional music, although it wasn't until the end of university that I really got into it. But once I did, I really, really dove deep into the American fiddle tradition, and there was definitely something about that felt sort of just immediate and raw in a way that I had, I think, been looking for. And to be able to go and travel in the mountains in North Carolina and such, and meet people, who lived in a place where their grandfather was from, and they played tunes that had been played in that area for a long time, felt really special and really unique to me, to be a part of a culture that was sort of continuous. I also started playing klezmer when I was about 12 years old, after going to some community celebrations and things, and that was always special to me. But I think it wasn't until I spent more and more time playing American music that I realized how special it felt to play music that my grandfather might have played or would have danced to. That's obviously just a different level of connection. And so now it's interesting, like if I play too much Jewish music, or if I only play Jewish music for a long time, I start to miss just playing some, down-home American fiddle tunes. But if I do that all the time also, I feel like there's something missing in some sort of deep expressive part of my soul that's not really getting out. So for me, it's great to have both of them, and there is something that feels more personal playing Jewish music. But at the same time, if I had to only keep my identity to that, I think I would feel a bit limited and not.
Perfect, Craig. You've said it all. That's good. If you can say something
Yes, hört man
very,
nicht.
very
Ist
fast
okay.
about Corona.
Corona, yes. Being a musician in the Corona times is obviously extremely challenging. It's funny because usually we spend all of our time organizing travel and emails about different concerts and running around, and I think we're always saying like, oh, if only we could just stay in one place for a few months, you know, I would get so much done. And now we did it, and I stayed in one place for quite a few months and got some things done, but it's such a different way of living that it's like you need a new training psychologically, I think, as well as everything else. So that's been a challenge.
Christian, sorry to interrupt.
That's all right.
Do you think it's brought the Yiddishkeit community together in some way?
Right, yeah. It's interesting to see how all the different musical communities have taken the pandemic, and I think that the Yiddish music community has really done an incredible job of using this time to come together, perhaps because there's still so many unanswered questions and things we don't really understand. So I've been working with various friends and scholars around the world, doing some conversations on Zoom. I set up a Facebook group and doing some various kind of video challenges, just trying to get people to engage with some of the ethnographies that have been done, the work of Moshe Beregovsky in particular, a Ukrainian.
Yeah, that's great. Now, Craig, do you think that the international quality of the Yiddish, the Yiddish cultural community, has that brought out the best in internet?
Yeah, I think because the Yiddish music community is so spread out, there's little pockets everywhere, we're kind of used to doing things either in conferences or online, and there's a lot of these different little groups of people messaging about things. So we've been kind of particularly well set up, I think, to deal with the pandemic. And there's been a strong effort, I think, to take some of those conversations out of private messages and make them into more of a public discourse. So it's really been incredible to see that happening and see the conversation being opened up and sort of everybody making an effort to welcome other people in.
That's great. I mean, so because there's been things that have gone on in Brazil, in Canada, in New York, and in Berlin.
Yeah, it's really been international, which is, it's partly just a product of the way that this scene has been growing and the growing interest. And I think also just the desire for all of us to reach out across borders and try to include as many people as we can. I think also Jewish music, there's, it's easy to sort of get the surface of it, but a lot of what makes it really great are these subtle details. And so there are things that you really kind of need to spend time with. And for a lot of people, unless you're really devoted to it, you don't necessarily travel to New York or to Berlin or somewhere to go to a conference about it. So we've been finding a lot of people have been showing up and doing these things online that otherwise might be interested but wouldn't be able to make that effort. So it's really special.
Perfect. Thank you, Craig.
Yes.
That's perfect.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Things.
That's it.
Things that we say.
Now we play.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Was ist das hier?